Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. We will discuss on drone. Do you know that World Talent Economy Forum collaborate with India Soft and more than 5,000 entrepreneurs from 200 countries from around the world they join in this conference, and we are developing talent economy lab inside India so we can cover around 2 billion peoples. So drone is one of the important issue for India Soft, so we will discuss on that particular issues, and we have our world famous speaker Mr. David Smith. So he gonna give his presentation on drone technology.
Sharif, thank you so much for letting me start out today with this. Drone technology is all in the news lately with how they're being used in the conflict in the war between Russia and Ukraine. And we're seeing them used in a lot of different ways there, from surveillance to actually uh, attacking and wiping out tanks and other airplanes and facilities like that. But basically, drones are in a class of vehicle called UAVs, for unmanned aerial vehicles. And a drone or UAV is an aircraft without any human pilot on board. Uh, and they are controlled remotely. Most of them are controlled remotely by a human being. Some of them are beginning to be used autonomously, where they are actually in charge of themselves and where they're headed and what they're doing and how they're being used. They were originally developed in the early 20th century for military missions that were thought of too dull or too dangerous for humans. And, in this century, they're a useful asset to military. They're useful in many, many different commercial areas, and we'll talk a bit more about that. And as we've looked over the last 10 years, the cost of drones have fallen dramatically, and the control technologies have improved tremendously as well. And so their use has expanded to many commercial areas. You see them in agriculture, you'll see them in uh, forest fire monitoring, river, environmental. You see them in aerial photography. You see them in entertainment being used with cameras and other things. You see them, the police are using them. You see them used for surveillance, for infrastructure inspections, now product delivery, entertainment, and yes, we even have drone racing today. And so they have begun to expand to many different areas of our society and use today. Um, I can tell you that I have seen so many drones being used lately that has become a problem, particularly around airports where planes have had to abort landings and takeoffs because of some of the drone systems. But I'm going to talk generically across drones using both the drones that are used commercially and the drones that are being used in military service because they're very different. What was really funny is the some of the early days of drones were in the early days of when you saw uh, drones used for target practice for example, the firing of battleship drones. You saw some of the very early ones back in actually the late 1920s and early 1930s. Being used in some of them. One of them was called a Fairy Queen, and the other one was a de Havilland Queen Bee. They were examples of how they were put into flight to test out anti-aircraft, to test out others, and then later on for even airplanes to attack as a way to use their guns and get used to do them. Uh, and you see that use. We also see that in addition to a human controlling them, the autonomous drones are using a whole host of really advanced technologies to carry out their missions without a human being involved, such as cloud computing, computer vision, LIDAR, hyperspectral, multispectral imaging, visual imaging, artificial intelligence, machine learning, thermal sensors, deep learning, and it really goes on to show the same type of things that are being proved there are critical as we look at the future of autonomous vehicles on the ground as well too. Plus, we're beginning to see more and more aircraft that are going to be electric powered, smaller aircraft, and many of these will end up being autonomous uh, airframes, even though they are carrying passengers, and most will also carry a backup pilot with those as well. So it's really not a drone, but it's taking this drone technology and beginning to use it. Uh, you begin to see other type of things. And let me just say what is not a drone. So if I fire a missile and it's traveling, that is not a drone. It's one that has more control, more of it itself. And there's also a distinction between drones today and remote controlled aircraft. And it really needs to be clarified as we look at some of them. And in some jurisdictions around the world, the rules for drone vary dramatically based on the weight of the drone, how high the drone can fly, and other areas like that. Um, you also can see that drones are beginning to be used uh, as a adjunct to other planes for missions too, and begins to that. I've seen a couple of business plans recently where entrepreneurs are proposing to use small drones as taxis, as air taxi, to begin to put two, three, maybe four people on it and be able to use the drones to transport them between points. Um, we're beginning to see an increased use of drones to deliver products from uh, medical supplies, survival food where they're needed, to delivering pizzas and groceries and other things like that. So again, the application of drone technology is really fairly broad, and what you can see there. The size of drones vary tremendously. The largest group of drones in the um, world are those that are sold to individuals, and they're small. They're less than 20 pounds, and reasonably slow. But then you go up to some of the larger drones, which are some of the military drones, and they weigh thousands and thousands of pounds and have very long endurance and very large range. Most of the small UAVs that you see as individuals, they have only a range of about a mile or two and endurance of half an hour to three-quarters of an hour. Where some of these other drones, they have endurances of days in the air and others. So a lot of different types and sizes and ranges that they can carry. And you also see them go up differently in height as well too. So most of the small drones, they're limited to around 1,500 feet in altitude. So about 500 meters, about 2 kilometers range. You see larger ones that go up more than that. Some of the tactical drones you're seeing be used in the Ukraine Russian war, they fly at around 3,000 to 5,000 uh, meters, so about 10,000 feet, and have a range of 50 to 150 kilometers. Then you see the larger ones that go up to, with like the ones that the Russian aircraft hit of the United States, the Reaper, which has a range of I think it's close to 10,000 uh, uh, miles with how it is, and can fly over 30,000 feet in the air. So a wide range uh, of usage and sizes for it. Uh, but like I said, drones actually started back in the early days of it. One of the very first drones was actually back in 1849, and it was used for the Navy for warfighting. And they used it to drop bombs out on targets. And then you saw a radio controlled drone in 1903 being developed and began to push them forward. You know, we've talked a lot in the program about Nikola Tesla, and he described a fleet of uncrewed aerial combat vehicles or drones in 1915. And that's what inspired a lot of the growth right around that. Um, in World War II, drones began to be used more uh, intensely, and you saw that in conflicts after that. In there from all different types of it, in all different sizes now. And you saw them used in intelligence roles, in roles for defensive applications, and roles for offensive applications, and others, and work there. But today, if you begin to look at drones, they look so very different, and there's so many different types of drones that can be uh, applied today in so many different configurations. And you see some that look like traditional airplanes. You see some that look like helicopters. You see some that look like quadcopters, which can be brought up and used for both vertical takeoff and landing as well as flying. Um, and for many of the small size drones, at least in the United States, you do not need a license to fly them. And that is really making it become even a hobby sport for people now. I really sometimes question some of that, as I've seen some of my friends buzzed by drones in their backyards. We've seen people in high rises have drones taking pictures outside their apartments and stuff and their condos. So a lot of different applications, but drones is a technology, particularly in the commercial applications like agriculture, uh, firefighting of all different types and forest fires, inspecting infrastructure, using drones to fly along pipelines, to fly along uh, high ampage power distribution lines, and others. It's a tremendous use of applications for that. Also, in the military, you see drones of all different types, and I, at South by Southwest, we were talking to one soldier who actually took advantage of some of the technology I had been an architect of, talking about how with drones he can see over the next hill and the hill after that, so he doesn't have to put people in harm's way, to just see what's happening around them, and how that has made uh, the environment safer for everyone involved with that. So, Sharif, I think that's a good introduction, and I'll let you take it on to them. You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. David Smith. Now I request Mr. Donald. You know that World Talent Economy Forum, we are working closely with IndiaSoft. Right now we are in India. It's one of the world largest populated country, around 1.9 billion people. So drone is one of the important topic for South Asian region. Some startup they're already introducing this technology. So what do you think? How it can be helpful for this South Asian economy, specifically for Indian economy, when we start uh, this conference, this India Soft, the minister from the government side, they declare a blueprint of $32 trillion economy next 25 years. So, do you believe this kind of innovation can be helpful for Indian economy to achieve their objective?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think um, I know right now the use of drones that's been getting a lot of press is the military use because Ukraine is using them quite effectively. I was They've been able to get drones to go all the way to blowing up uh, munitions dumps inside of Russia. And I saw an article the other day that Ukraine is about to do an offensive against Russia, and they've got 30,000 kamikaze drones that they're going to use to kind of soften the territory before they advance, which would be kind of a nightmare, really. You can imagine for the people that are operating the drones, it's sort of like a video game. I mean, they sit there and watch it on their TV screen, on their computer screen, and they use a joystick and they just take this kamikaze drone and they, you know, drive it right into somebody's house or right into their trench or whatever, and then blow them up. So they've certainly been being used for that. I hope India doesn't get in a situation where they have to fight anybody and they need anything like that. Um, that would be, or anyone in South Asia winds up having to do that. I have a friend who is an inventor. He invented the retractable uh, USB for when you have a USB that you pull out and you stick into your computer or your device. He invented that. He patented it. He has the patent on it, and he didn't make any money on it at all. And everybody just violated his patent. And then finally, one day, he hired some lawyers down in Los Angeles, and he went after every single solitary person that violated his patent. And now he just does whatever he feels like. And one of the things he felt like was getting interested in drones. And one of the things he does with his drones is he goes around and he uses it for photography. And that's a very common use of drones around here, is that they're used for now if real estate people, if they're showing houses, you hire him or hire somebody like him, and they use the drone, and it goes all around their house and goes over it and looks at it, and then goes up and looks at the neighborhood, and then goes down the street and gets a street view. But that's kind of a fun use of it. And of course, in Hollywood, they use it now to get views from the top of what's going on when they're making movies. I was just looking it up, and drones, if you want to buy a drone, you can buy kits and put them together yourself, which is basically, I think, what the Ukrainians are doing. They're assembling the drones. And if you want to buy a drone, they're anywhere from $90 US to $10,000 US. So depending on what you're trying to do, there's different prices of drones. How can they be useful? Well, one way that they're used in the United States, another way that they're used is within large construction projects. They can become accurate enough with GPS and LiDAR that you can actually measure, when you're doing a construction project, you can actually go over the construction project and find out if everything's level. And the same thing can work in fields, because when you're trying to irrigate a field, you want it to be level. You don't want to put the water in and have the water all go to one side of the field and wreck things. You want it to be completely level, and they're using drones to be able to do that too. So those are uses for drones, and then China's making a lot of money selling them, and Iran is making money selling them. Iran has been selling them as war weapons, and they're selling them to Russia. And so, those are all different uses for them. they're an interesting technology. I'm not sure, you know, it's a product that you can make and sell, and it has uses which David's elaborated. I'm not sure that if it's the, you know, the killer app necessarily, but I think it's something that you know, it's there's something that you can buy the pieces from China and other places and assemble them, or, you know, ultimately you could make parts of them, and uh, it could be something that you manufacture and make money from, and something that you can use. So that's basically all I can say about them right now.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you. We have our another friend from Africa. So, what you want to share from Africa? What's your experience about drone technology, or do you have any new startup on drone?
All right. Here in Africa, the drone technology for now, I do see is only for those who are into videography and photography. Those that makes use of the cameras, maybe in terms of functions like wedding functions. That's where I do see people who make use of drones. Then for real estate, like what David said, uh, here in Africa, here, especially in Nigeria, some um, some big tech real estate company now do deploy drones for uh, check supervision, and then for documentaries. If most guys who are into documentaries field, um, when you want to cover a large space without running around, being on the wheel, can use the drone to cover up a large space, a large area, and you can do your documentation from from your standing point. It's not just, it haven't gone to the agricultural aspect, and I've not heard about the military aspect of the drone, but for sure for entertainment and documentation and normal wedding anniversary.
Sorry, I think he has internet problem. Professor David Smith, uh, in terms of technology development, we are observing in India there are a startup, lot of startup, and they are really successful. Uh, Even from today's newspaper, I'm observing that a farmer developed a very successful startup in India, and in between a few years, they make a billion-dollar company. So, what do you think? What is the prospect of Indian economy when they integrate this kind of technology?
Well, particularly in a country the size of India, and with some of the complexity you have in the rural areas, the geography, and the density in some of the urban areas, drone technology makes so much sense there because it has applicability in so many markets. Um, and there are some of the
Some of the Sorry,
applications of it in terms of
apologies. My network went off.
are very broadly used. And the good thing about drone technology is that it's easy to find uses locally for it. And so you're going to have a very good market size that way. Some of the drones can be mass produced. Those are primarily more in the entertainment side that you're seeing them. Some of the more interesting drone technology I've seen recently is, for example, firefighting drones, where you can equip them to go and deliver firefighting materials, either fire retardant or even water into a fire itself. You're seeing drones used to search for people in fires, in floods, and natural disasters, and how it can be used. The um, other type of things for entrepreneurs is just you're seeing them used so many different places with, like I said, for delivery, for doing local services. I can particularly see in in Indian places it's going to be used more for compliance. The particularly in the Middle East today, you're seeing drones used to assure compliance. For example, one of the articles in Smart Cities shows that you're using drones for compliance, and they showed drones flying over buildings where people had built unauthorized structures, or they were being used to see new construction going up that was not permitted, was not authorized, and stuff. So, wide variety of use. And not only the manufacturer drones, but service providers. You can become a drone photographer, a drone surveyor for moderate size investments. And even, for example, in real estate, here in Austin, Texas, many of the homes costing above $1 million as part of how they're presented includes a drone flying up to the house and a drone flying around the neighborhood so that you have a perspective of how the house is positioned among others. And so for an entrepreneur, an Indian entrepreneur, a Asian entrepreneur, a lot of opportunities on the future of drones, Sharif.
Thank you. Mr. Donald.
Well, I have to agree with, I definitely agree with David that, I mean, I think everybody's been saying the same thing, that basically drones are used for photography and things like real estate. I mentioned that in the first place. I was saying that my friend does that. And I think around here, if a drone was looking at $1 million house, the question would be, is it still standing? I mean, you know, a house that inexpensive would be, you'd wonder if it was still intact. But just a little joke there. California real estate's pretty expensive. But I mean, movies, as I also said, that and how do you pronounce your name?
No, my name is Ifeanyi. That is an Igbo name from the Nigerian from the Nigerian country. The Igbo tribe from Nigerian Ifeanyi. Ifeanyi. Yeah. Ifeanyi. Yeah. 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 Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Just would like to, sometimes with the spelling, as Ifeanyi was saying that he was talking about making documentaries, and so that's, as I was saying, it's useful for film. I think the one thing about entrepreneurs is that they're very creative and they can find uses for things sometimes that we can't think of right now. So I would suggest that as time goes on, people are going to find more uses for drones. But I think that what we're coming to is that their uses are still pretty limited right now. They're not like computers or something that are used for absolutely everything. Drones are fairly limited. There's issues with them because you can't get them. They're, for instance, where I live in right near where I live is a marine preserve, and it's you're not allowed to fish there. It's a preserve, so it preserves the animals. It's a place where the animals can be safe, and the sea life can be safe. And it's, the point of it is that we're overfishing, and you have to have areas where the fish can breed and replicate without being harvested and wiping out the populations of the fish. So I live in an area that is a very large area where the sea otters and the seals and sea lions and all the sea mammals, the whales and then fish and things like that are all protected. You're not allowed to hunt them or just even disturb them. It's actually, if you disturb a sea otter, it's a very large fine. And as a consequence, you're not allowed to use drones to photograph them. You can't, a lot of people love to surf here, and you can't use drones to photograph the surfers. So because they're noisy and intrusive, they're not used. Though I have a friend that went outside of the preserve, and he was the same friend that I said did real estate, and he was using his drone, and really early on, before most people had drones, and somebody came up to him and they said, "Well, what are you doing? Do you like work for the CIA or something?" And he said, "No, the CIA works for me." Scared him, but anyway. That's what basically my take on drones.
Thank you, Mr. Ifani. Right? Yeah. What's your view?
Yes.
It's annoying. That's weird.
Yes. Go ahead. Yes, I can hear you.
Or what you want to share with our audience?
Yeah. What I would share is here in Africa we need to educate our people on other areas that drone can play a role, like in agriculture, mostly in agriculture, Then in also surveillance not mostly from the military, but from this security agencies of a particular country before you start bringing the military. So if we educate them the importance of all this, you can see that a farmer here or entrepreneur here will move away from only documentation, photography, and videography, filmmaking to other areas of agriculture, other areas of drone usage, and it will make it will it will reduce the stress of maybe putting up more people in the farm. The drone can do maybe any marking up or some landmark, then you can then know what to do about it. So you just education first. When the education comes in, other areas opens up for drones.
Okay, thank you, Professor David Smith. How we can develop drone pilots and how we can help this emerging economy.
Well, first of all, Sharif, there are multiple classes of drone pilots. At the lowest level, there's not a formal certification process. And in many places, not a formal training process at that level either. And these are the drones that cannot fly very high, very large range, nor carry much weight. But then you go different types of places. For example, here in the United States, for example, in Silicon Valley and in Austin, there's actually courses in our community colleges you can take about flying drones and other activities like that. And then there's certification programs. Once you get to a particular size and weight and altitude, in the United States, you actually have to pass FAA, Federal Aviation Administration test, just as though you were a pilot, a private pilot or a commercial pilot, depending on the type of drone you're using and what its activity is. And then in many instances, drones have to follow the same rules as if you were flying your own private airplane, in that you have to respect airways, um, and uh, be certified to that. And there are no fly zones for drones. You cannot fly as a private citizen a drone around an airport, around a military base, around critical infrastructure, for example, a nuclear plant, uh, and dams and other elements like that because of the risk factor. So there's a lot to learn and be able to do. I I believe we're going to see a time coming up globally in the not too far future where you will see more regulations put in place around who can fly a drone, how the drones can be used, and what are the restrictive areas on that because of all of the activities uh, going on, not necessarily military actions, but where drones can cause accidents. There recently was a small plane here in Texas that crashed because a drone ran into the plane in the air and it disabled the engine. So you're seeing those type of places where you see those. There also was in my neighborhood recently a post in one of our groups here about a young kid who was taking his new drone, putting a camera on it, and flying around the neighborhood and uh, coming up to windows and shooting his camera through the windows and taking pictures and stuff. Um, and the police were called, and with that, another neighbor with another drone actually took their shotgun out and shot the drone down over his house as an invasion of privacy, which actually ended up breaking some laws here with destruction of private property. So a lot of rules, a lot of areas, but for the small drones, particularly the ones called the quad rotor drones, where you have four propellers on it, which they're pretty stable to fly. And as long as you don't exceed the altitude that they're doing or the purpose you're using it for, you can fly those without any type of license, at least here in the United States. So, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. Donald.
Well, I don't know what regulations are in the rest of the world, but so that's not something I'm too interested in. I mean, it's not something I'm not, and thus something I know much about. But I really, taking off on what Ifenya said, Ifenya is that it's going to be useful in Africa and other countries to be able to start using them for things like agriculture and being able to for mapping and other kinds of things, and move beyond photography and the kind of uses that are being used now. And it's something that would be good for entrepreneurs, figure it out, start a business being able to assist with agriculture, start a business doing the different kinds of things. And you kind of have to go all over the world and check it out, find out what people are doing. And that's, as I said before, that's what entrepreneurs do. They figure out things that people figure out ways to make money from them. So that's basically, that's what I can say. They're new and they're not used for very much yet, but there's possibilities for them.
Thank you. Uchi, what do you think? Specifically, I'm very interested about the youth community of Africa, uh, how they involve with new technology innovations, or how they involve with or how they get support from government agency or corporation for involving this ecosystem.
All right. To be to be frank to you, from my country, Nigeria, we have these. It's got support from the NGO, but due to the fact of corruption has eaten deep down in the country, I'm not going to assure you that all the funds that the NGO sends down here gets to the common, we'll call it the common man, like the masses. It gets eaten by those on the top. So, but if we are going to like look into Africa as a big market, I would suggest we start with education first. When you educate the African man in his language, he will understand you more better than when you bring in a foreign language he or she cannot communicate with. So if we start with education, then we look at other countries in Africa who support the drone idea, because I'm not going to paint it. All of us are seeing what's happening in Nigeria. Well, you do brass, you know what's happening here, and it's not a thing to cover up. So education first, then we move for to enlighten those in government the benefits they will gain if drones are being allowed in various countries with its own regulation, like what Donald said about privacy. Because if you give it out freely to people, most people have the intention to abuse it. So if it's coming into Africa, it comes in with education behind it, then it comes with regulation, like, and also privacy laws, so that people doesn't abuse making use of the drone. But it's a welcome idea because it's going to revolutionize so many things, both in delivery, section, manufacturing, agriculture, real estate, every sector of entrepreneurship or business development. The drone will revolutionize it.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, Sharif, thank you again for a very good session. The other thing I think you will see is that even the materials and things you use to construct drones have been changing dramatically. You have all types of usage, from small GPS receivers, batteries, cameras, sensors, particularly ultrasonic sensors, collision avoidance sensors, thermal sensors, LiDAR, many others. You see accelerometers. You begin to see all types of antennas, receivers, control systems. Even we're beginning to see the joysticks that Donald and I talked about earlier being replaced by even gloves, virtual augmented reality gloves and other like that. You're seeing cameras changing. All types of autonomous features being added to it, so that you can really understand the breadth of it. You're also seeing chemical sensors. You're looking at gyroscopes. Many different things that make up it. And some of the uses. For example, once hyperspectral sensors were put on drones, they're looking at things like usage and water quality, crop health, how the soil is, how the other elements are, where pollution is happening. So many different applications of it being used. The motors, tremendous advances in that, in small propellers and how to control and fly it. But the use of drones is going to continue to go, and the applications, the industries they're going to be used in. are ones that your imagination almost can control how you use drones in the future. And it's a perfect one for entrepreneurs to look at unmet needs, uh, and particularly with deliveries and quick ways to operate and discover things. It will be a great business, both not only, like I said before, not only manufacturing drones, but actually the services that you can provide. You just need to think about what you want to do with it. You know, for example, during the pandemic, drones were increasingly used to deliver goods and services, to deliver medicine to different places. Uh, you know, regulators today are looking at how you can support the expansion of them in both carrying heavy things. Uh, how can you begin to look at uh, uh, how they can be used? For example, in the United States, you saw them in Ghana, in uh, Africa. Drones delivered 13% of the country's initial shipments of COVID vaccines in just 3 days. And you saw it used to do things that would have taken a lot longer by land transportation. Um, you see them used where there's in the rural environment more and more. You're seeing places where, for example, in Saudi Arabia, uh, they are initiating a heavy lift drone project, and it will be used for that. And they're doing it in conjunction with Switzerland, India, and other governments to try to look at how to use larger drones for heavy lift delivery and make them work. So, if I look at the fourth industrial revolution and that what will take place, the use of drones is going to be a very important part of that. And again, I think the future of drone technology is bright. The market size is continuing to grow dramatically, the range, the weight, the endurance continuing to go. And even the amount of data that is drone uses is continuing to increase with more and more advances in the radio frequencies that can be used to drive them. So, Sharif, I just think you're going to see it grow in all purposes. Like Donald said, and others of me, the use in military is going to continue, delivery, emergency rescue, agriculture, uh, even in outer space. You're seeing it in medicine, wildlife, photography, and many other uh, activities. So the challenges, though, are privacy. Privacy is one of the big challenges. Drone airspace, uh, cybersecurity. I can take over drones and cause them to do different things because there's not much security on particularly the consumer side of drone technology. So in many areas, privacy and cybersecurity is important, is also in drones. So Sharif, I think that's my concluding remarks.
Thank you. Mr. Donald, what's your concluding remarks for today?
You're
Africa
muted.
is evolving really quickly now because they're starting an African free trade zone. And Africa's had difficulty trading between the countries inside of Africa because it's been difficult for basically changing the currency from one country in Africa to another country in Africa because the currency exchange has had to go to clearing houses all the way in London in the United States to transfer the money from bank to bank. And that's changing now. So Africa is changing in very positive ways. And Africa is, the 300-pound gorilla, as we said. It's a very young continent with amazing resources and amazing potential, and it's been exploited for a long time. But it's finally coming to the point where the Africans are taking charge of their own country. It's got a lot of corruption that it has to be worked through, and some countries are really starting to deal with it. And I'm very optimistic that it will continue to progress. And so whatever you're building, whether it's drones or anything that you're building in Africa, and Africa is similar to other places in the developing world, you you have the challenges of how you're going to be able to control what it is that you're doing, so that others don't just steal what you're doing, and being able to sell things in ways that allow you to make things be profitable. And that's a complex issue that relates to all manufacturing. But I just continue to say that David has laid out a lot of different ways that drones can be used, and they're not being used in a lot of places to do those things. And I think everyone has laid out some of the reasons that they're not. Privacy, and there's still some issues, like, I mean, when the drone goes down to deliver something on somebody's front porch, it could hit somebody, or it could get hit by a car that's parking in the driveway. I mean, there's all these different kinds of things to think about when you've got a drone that's in the same airspace or space as a human being, or a car, or an airplane, or all the different things that it could possibly interact with. So we've got a while for them to be completely good neighbors or good citizens that we interact with. So there's privacy, collisions, different kinds of things. And all of those things are fun things that can be worked out by entrepreneurs everywhere, anywhere. And you can build drones. There's drone kits that you can buy. So if you want to put together a drone and modify it so it works better, you can just buy a kit online. Maybe it's not as easy to do in some parts of Africa, or some parts of India, but it's certainly doable. And so there's something that we're learning how they work, and it's one of those technologies that I think if somebody wants to get involved with it, it's something that it has room to grow. It's not an old dead technology that's been completely worked out, and the only people that you can compete with are companies that are so big that there's nothing you can do to possibly compete with them. It's something that you could get into and actually add something to make a difference. So that's what I can say. So thank you very much. I always enjoy being on the show. Thank you, Sharif, for putting this together.
Thank you. Mr. Uchi, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Right. My conclusion is as based on what David and Donald just said, privacy. If we are making a drone in Africa here, because Africa have a large economy, have the large market for that, we should look at the privacy, the terrain, and the social, political, and economic situation of each country. And you can integrate the software of the drone into the blockchain, because the blockchain now is a network which works faster, which makes things softwares to get faster. So if we are making a drone, we also look into integrating it into the blockchain. Now, into the blockchain is going to preserve the softwares from counterfeit code software manufacturing to maybe to overrun the drones. And also we look at pricing. How are you making it affordable for people down here to come in? And also you look also the spare parts. Should any of the drone get faulty, is the spare parts available to replace it, or will it be sent back to Europe or to Asia before it gets back to Africa? So these are the things you're looking to it. And Africa is cool, Asia is cool. Every places are okay for the drones to function. Moreover, the drones are people should learn that the drones are no more under the military power now. It's coming into the social economic life of every citizen. That the drone can play a role in in our lives. So that's my own contribution.
Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Hopefully tomorrow we can organize another great event. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, corporation and academy. Thank you, bye bye and take care.
Bye.